Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Men podcast. I am here with Luke Hartelust today, and super excited to have him here. This is going to be a great conversation. I do want to remind you before we get started, go to maxedoutman.com. We've got courses and coaching, lots of resources over there, and don't forget to check out the additional episodes of our podcast. Rate and review, please. Really helps us get other people listening to this. Also, I'm thinking about doing a Costa Rican retreat, like an adventure retreat for men. I've mentioned it to a couple of people. I've mentioned it on this podcast a couple of times so far. And truth be told, I have no plans whatsoever. So if you're interested in doing this, let me know. And then we can kind of walk through that. Go to just email me at kd@maxedoutman.com. Let me know if you're interested. I want to give Luke's short bio here, and then I'll have you fill in the gaps for us. But as a visionary leader and investor deeply rooted in the health and wellness industry, Luke's career is driven by a passion for transformative change and innovation, leveraging his experience in high-performance strategies and advanced technology, including AI. He's committed to disrupting traditional health paradigms to disrupt the current landscape of the industry. His business, MNLY, is that what it's MNLY, so MNLY, is pioneering a new approach to men's health, redefining performance and well-being through advanced technologies and evidence-based solutions, not just making this stuff up as we go along, right? Our collaborative team, his collaborative team of men's health science experts, neuroscientists, data scientists, sports nutritionists offer a comprehensive, multifaceted, scientifically driven approach. That's a mouthful, Luke. MNLY combines biological environmental analysis, research data, and artificial intelligence to formulate precision nutrition, lifestyle, and supplement solutions for optimal male health. That's so exciting about everything that's going on. I've got a buddy of mine that's also kind of in this general space, and it's just it's something I hadn't really been exposed to until probably 6 months ago, and I'm just like, this is so cool, especially like as a data nerd, as an exercise physiology guy back in the day. This is so cool. So thanks for coming on board, and I'm super excited to talk to you. This is gonna be awesome.
Yeah, mate. That was an extensive bio. I appreciate you having me on, man. I'm looking forward to diving in and jamming.
Yeah, so that tested my reading skills, I guess, and the ability to do that. But hey, fill in the gaps for us. I know that you do. You're an entrepreneur, right? You do tons of different things. But talk to me about kind of your journey, why you're interested in this. You're a health and fitness guy, obviously work out, and that's important to you. Just kind of give us a little bit of background on who we're talking to.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, and it's a very long journey. So I'll give you the high level.
Take as long as you want, man.
So I'm not your typical health expert. Obviously, it's a medical advice that we're going to talk about here. But my background is in the business of fitness, health and wellness, and high performance coaching, essentially. So I relocated to the US from Australia in 2016. I brought the F45 training franchise concept over from Sydney, where it originated, to Southern California, and over a 6-year career, owned and operated a portfolio of franchises between LA and San Diego. During my time as the CEO of the portfolio, I got to work with literally hundreds of individuals that were in their pursuit for a better level of, let's say, well-being than they were currently experiencing, essentially. And then for the latter part of that career, I was predominantly working with male professionals and executives and athletes to help them improve their personal and professional performance. And really, it was really through that journey, I got to understand the strains on their health and well-being, essentially due to their lifestyle, suffering from low libido, chronic stress, burnout, low energy, and obviously a lot of mental health issues as well. And you can see that in today's really fast-paced, stimulating world, men's health specifically is obviously facing pretty alarming challenges and escalating rates of chronic disease, metabolic issues, declining testosterone. And we've really seen that the traditional, how do I put it, the traditional, healthcare one-size-fits-all model just essentially falls short. And
no one call that
after
sick
working,
care, right? We call
yeah,
that sick care, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm working with, even not just working with a lot of these men, but on myself consistently and tracking data and making sure that I'm optimized so that I have the right output so that I can accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. I realized it's time for a change. And there was a number of models that came out of this new data-driven approach on the market. And I think that if you look at where we're going, the advancements in AI, genetic testing, blood analysis, and these new really data-driven personalized health models, they're essentially the future. And Manly essentially is really kind of pioneering the way in the men's space. And I think now more than ever, and in the future, it's going to be more of a necessity for any man or woman who is actually seeking to really take control of their health and not rely on the normal kind of healthcare pathway.
Yeah, I love that. And the F45 thing is super interesting to me. That's Wahlberg does that, right? That's his that's kind of his, isn't he representative of them now? So I know that concept's super cool. I live in the middle of nowhere, so we don't have that. So I could do F45 in my basement where we work out.
Yeah.
But I love that concept. But talk to me about the difference between kind of this high performance, right? So you a lot of times can come at this from like, I want to just be a super high performer, right? Like I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a guy that works out all the time. I'm all these things. And so I want to maximize that, right? And no pun intended with Maxed Out Man, but, but what about just like the normal person? Like talk to me about holistic health and fitness as it relates to just longevity, quality of life, everything that goes into what you do.
Yeah, I mean that's a loaded question, and I get asked this quite often for the reason of where do I start, right? Where do I start? You've got an individual that is looking to improve their productivity, their health and happiness. Mm-hmm. But the majority of people are so paralyzed by all the information that's on the marketplace so that they never actually get started, because there's so much detail, there's so much conflicting science out there. And one of the baselines and one of the first places that I believe is the best place to start is go and get a baseline for your biology. So go and get either whether it's an at-home blood test or whether it's a labs from somewhere like LabCorp that can do a blood draw. Because until you have that baseline, until you understand really what's going on underneath the hood, you're essentially flying blind. And it's really hard to implement any really effective nutrition, lifestyle, supplemental protocols or regimes or programs until you really understand what's going on from a biological standpoint. Then once you have that, it's very easy to just implement systematically different recommendations and protocols and different solutions and test what's working. That's the beautiful thing about not just what Manly is doing, but where the industry is going right now is it's all data driven. So it's all evidence-based solutions. You don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust Manly or the company. You don't even have to trust your doctor. You now have access to go and get the data sets that you need so that you can understand what's going on from a biological standpoint and even from an environmental health standpoint. And then you can implement solutions and changes and then retest in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And then you can see what's working and what's not. And then you just adjust and improve from there. And I think, and it goes back to when, Whoop, I'm wearing a Whoop right now, cheeky plug there, but
Aura right here for me.
I have an Aura as well. And I've gone back and forth between both. I love both companies. And it goes back to when they first came on the market is there's now you have so many data sets in real time about what's going on from your biometrics. What they didn't include was actionable steps once you have that data. So you have the data, now what do you do with it? And so prior to launching Manly and having this model that we now have now in this precision health vertical, I would always coach my clients to look at the data and then use that data to reverse engineer what they did to either A, accomplish those results, or B, or accomplish the negative results. And then how can we improve the day before or whatever those metrics are to then improve the results over time. So for instance, if you're having poor sleep, it's reverse engineering what you're eating, what your lifestyle habits are, and what those items are that you are essentially doing that day to accomplish that poor sleep result. And then the opposite as well is if you accomplish a great sleep score and you're feeling generally very energetic and you've got a lot of vitality and you're clear, you've got no brain fog, you can focus. What did you do that day to accomplish that sleep score essentially? So that's a very easy way to put it. But now we have all this other data and we have AI that is allowing us to really formulate personalized protocols in real time based on hundreds of data points unique that are also unique to the individual. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I want to talk more about the AI aspect of it and how you guys manipulate the data. I said in my last podcast that getting some of this more this deeper data was super eye-opening for me. So my wife and I, we've been married for a long time, 29 years this July. But we're both exercise. Like we started exercising. That was the beginning of our relationship, and we've done it all over time. And I'm a guy that works out 5 to 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I do cardio. I lift weights, and all these things. And so I had this like cocky attitude about my health and fitness. Right. I've never been a great sleeper. Like I was one of those guys, one of those kids that they'd wake up. I would wake up at the neighbor's house from sleepwalking and like would literally leave the house. In my sleep. So sleep has always been a problem for me, but I'm just like, oh, that's how it is. Right. Like that was my attitude. And so when we first started going and having this testing done and gathering this data, we did the Whoop. My wife didn't like she didn't like the wearable aspect of it on her wrist. And so we switched to Aura. I like Aura's sleep data better, speaking of sleep. But all that to say, what was super interesting to me is that it was like, all right, so you're this healthy guy, but at the end of the day, you're under recovered. You're not necessarily overtrained because that's super hard to do, but you're under recovered. You sleep like crap. Your HRV is terrible. All of these things. And so I'm like, oh, I'm way less healthy than I thought I was, right? Because the data was staring me right in the face. And so we began to make changes. Like we have this very definitive sleep routine now that involves, stopping eating at a certain amount of time. We have blackout curtains on her because it gets dark at like 11 o'clock at night here this time of year. So we have blackout curtains. We keep the room cool. We use blue blockers. We do all of these things. And my scores began to go up over time. And I'm just like, all right, well, and to your point, what am I doing in order to facilitate those results, right? But I love that, right? Like whether you're a high performance guy or just your average Joe, right? Like if you don't have the data, you don't know anything. You really don't. So you may feel like crap, or I may feel great, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything without having some data behind it.
Exactly. And the data just doesn't lie. It's evidence-based, and that's the beautiful part of it. And that's why now we're so much more in control of our health outcomes, because we're not relying on going to the doctor and going through and all of the barricades that we have to go through to get certain blood tests done. And then once we do have those tests, we don't get the broad, okay, you're within range. Like what is within range, compared to a declining a declining in health population. The ranges that some of these doctors use, for example, for testosterone is like 300 to 900. And if you look at a testosterone range at 300, that's not within range, right? That's not optimal. And so when you're moving through these different data-driven sets, you begin to really understand what's going on under the hood, you can then implement all of these different strategies and recommendations that have been proven and studied to actually improve each of those markers. And then you're trialing and testing, and that's just how we're able to now own our own health pathway and take real control of how we feel and what we want to do in terms of interventions and lifestyle protocols.
Yeah, I want you to dive into what MNLY does and what that kind of looks like in terms of a testing protocol, because you did mention like LabCorp and, you know, I do walk-in lab and that kind of stuff, but that's just kind of scratching the surface between, you know, blood serum versus cellular, you know, levels and those kind of things. So I want you to talk about that. You mentioned testosterone, which is, I've talked about I'm on TRT. I've been for several years. I have a mechanical issue, which is basically I had a motorcycle accident and fractured one of my testicles.
Wow.
Great story, by the way, but we won't
tell
it today.
I'll
tell you that. I'll tell you that story.
Let's dive in.
All right, I'll tell the story. So I had a motorcycle accident. Someone pulled out directly in front of me and stopped. And so I impacted the back of this car at 45 miles an hour. And you know, the best part of this story is like it knocked me out, right? And I'm laying on the ground and I look up and there was a BMX track directly across from where I had the accident. And so there's all these like 10 and 11-year-old boys, 12-year-old boys, right? So I wake up and I'm literally circled by about 6 or 7 of these kids. And I wake up and the first thing this kid says to me, he's about 11 or 12. He's like, dude, your bike is effed. But he used I was like, great, thanks a lot. So I get back from the hospital and I had actually left a dent in my gas tank from my left testicle, which so the physics of that. So I love that story. The dad joke is I have to put a roll of quarters in my right pocket or else I walk around in circles. So so we're going all over on this podcast, but all that to say, my testosterone was like 243.
Yeah.
And I was in my 40s. And what did they say? They were like, well, you're just below normal, right? And so this ridiculous norm that they use, which is and I want to bring this point home because you said declining health of the population. So what they do is they don't say what the norm was in 1950, 1960. They say based on the fact that we're old, fat, and eat like crap. Yeah. This is what this norm looks like. It's not a norm, it's an average. It really becomes an average. And so don't trust the doctor saying that this is the norm. It is my point, right?
Exactly. You know, the statistics right now paint a pretty grim picture for men's health overall. You know, studies are showing that I believe don't quote me on this, everyone. It's a 1% decline per year across all populations for testosterone levels. You know, and over I believe it's over a third or 35%. Of men in the US are classified as overweight, which then contributes to chronic health issues, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and it's 52% of men, all men are experiencing low libido as well. And then you have obviously the increase in male suicide rates. We're 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women as well. And most men are afraid to speak about the mental health issues. So the statistics right now are pretty alarming. And what our mission is essentially is at MNLY is to disrupt those metrics overall and see how much of an impact we can make across the board with all of these global statistics using our product and make an impact in the vertical that we're in.
What kind of testing are we doing? If someone goes, okay, I want to get involved with MNLY, what should I expect? What kind of testing are we doing? Kind of the protocols. Feel free to go into the AI stuff as much as you want. I know it's proprietary, so we got to be careful about some of that. But what would I expect in terms of going through that process?
Yeah, so we leverage biological and environmental data, research studies, and as you said, artificial intelligence to formulate precision lifestyle, nutrition, and supplement solutions for optimal male health. And so it starts with a biological test. So we use an at-home self-test kit, which is really seamless very easy to use. So instead of having to book a consultation at a blood draw lab or having someone come to your office or your home, it's a simple finger prick. So we use a lancet, you fill up 2 dual strips of blood, send those back to our lab. Within 48 hours, the lab partners analyze the blood work, and then they send the raw data through API to our portal. Now, we also ran a study on 500 professional men. These were actually all clients from one of the individuals on our science board. We wanted to figure out what were the top categories of male environmental health that they prioritize most. And it ended up being focus, confidence, stamina, mood, sleep, libido, and recovery. So we built an environmental health assessment. It's 80 questions to cover those pillars. And with those data points, it's over 100 data points that we test. We plug those into our portal, and then our AI populates a comprehensive health report. So we provide not only the results, because that is one of the issues that we've seen in the past that we're currently seeing with telehealth is you'll get bloods drawn and you'll get a PDF or a report that just tells you a bunch of numbers and doesn't give you an understanding and an in-depth understanding of what the biomarker is, what your result is, and how that correlates to your overall health. So our model populates the comprehensive health report. We have different scoring algorithms to give you an overall view of where you sit on the spectrum up against the rest of the data that Manly has, the data sets that Manly has. So it gives you a really in-depth understanding of where you currently sit holistically, and then overall with each biomarker and each health category as well. Yeah.
Go ahead, keep going.
So in terms of what we test for, now, as I said, we use an at-home blood test. So because of the nature of the at-home blood test, you are limited to the amount of biomarkers that you can test for. So we test for 19 different biomarkers. Those cover everything from vitamin D, B12, ferritin, so ALT, AST, EGFR, so kidney, liver function, and then your hormone panel, so free testosterone, total testosterone, SHBG, prolactin, and then all of your thyroid, so TSH, T4, T3, and then also your triglycerides, right? So your total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, creatinine. And with those specific biomarkers, our team ran through hundreds of studies to figure out what were really the top biomarkers that we could run with, given our limitations, that are going to give the individual and the user the most holistic view of where they currently stand from their biological health. And then in terms of the interventions that we can implement, how are they going to get the most bang for their buck, essentially, for lack of a better term.
Right. And how do those what kind of interventions are we talking about? I want to ask you that, and I also want you to kind of define for me what this holistic health thing means. I talked to my last guest. We were talking about he's a doctor of naturopathy. Yeah. So we talked about this whole, it's like when you say naturopathy, when you say holistic, you like imagine some dude that looks like Russell Brand sitting cross-legged in the room with sage burning and all that kind of stuff. But that's not what holistic means, right? Holistic, holistic is what? Like, define what holistic is, and then I want to talk about the intervention aspect of how all of that fits together for Manly and what you guys do. Yeah,
I love that. It's kind of a two-part question, with the holistic and functional health. So instead of going your traditional route, what we do is we're trying to treat the root cause of the issue, right? So instead of focusing specifically on top level kind of medications and things like that are going to be more just a band-aid. The functional health really kind of treats the root cause of the issue. And when we're looking at the data sets and the biomarkers specifically, and we can see what the deficiencies are. So looking at if you have poor sleep, which can relate to a ton of different health issues, chronic disease specifically as well, we're looking at why are you having poor sleep? It's like, okay, you're deficient in vitamin D. So we treat the vitamin D deficiency, for example. And that's going to obviously improve your sleep, improve your energy levels, reduce cortisol levels. If you're looking at, issues that, come up from increased cortisol levels and inflammation. It's looking at the issue of why do you have increased cortisol levels and how can we essentially treat what that issue is. So going really to the root cause. Was that a clear explanation?
Yeah, yeah, I do think that's clear. Can you walk me through those pillars? You went right through those pillars pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what those pillars are, kind of like definitively, and what things that men can do to kind of improve those in general.
Yes.
And I'm also interested. Well, we'll start there, and then I'll ask you another follow-up question after that.
Beautiful. So we have essentially seven core pillars that we analyze for in our environmental health assessment. And those are focus, stamina, confidence, mood, sleep, libido, and recovery. And so basically what we do is we look at where you score on each of those specific pillars. And then our model will essentially select the top 3 to 5 interventions that have been historically proven to improve those markers over time the most effectively, right? So when you're looking at the focus or the confidence or the stamina consistently, it's what can we essentially do to improve those markers. And when we're looking at those different interventions, it's things like meditation, it's things like breath work, cold plunging, flow states, and we're looking at a real spectrum of a lot of biohacky stuff, which is pretty exciting. When you have an individual that has low libido, for instance, where we're using interventions like things that have been proven, they're a little unorthodox, like icing the testicles for 10 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week, which actually has been proven. So when you cool the testicles, it actually improves the sperm count significantly as well, which increases your testosterone.
So I shouldn't be holding them whenever I'm doing the cold plunge. I gotta just let them. I mean, they're not free. They're not free because they're freaking cold. But so that's the
idea. Exactly. And when we look at the stamina category, we're looking at how can we mitigate burnout, right? And it's like, how can we implement more time blocking? How can we implement more of a structured schedule so that you're taking regular breaks? As I said, walking, meditations, a lot of breath work, and then also sauna, ice as well, like I said. And when you're sitting in a sauna or an ice bath and you're doing that breath work, it's about mitigating the risk of having a poorly operating nervous system, essentially. And so a lot of the work that we do is with obviously professionals. And so looking at the chronic stress, looking at the burnout that these guys experience, and looking at the data that we have based on the stamina and the focus and the energy levels of most of the data sets that we have from the users that we have on right now, it's very, very clear and it's very apparent that those kind of interventions are highly, highly, highly effective, but they're also not so mainstream that everyone can understand how to just implement those very easily, right?
Yeah, and there's biomarker. You've got the biomarkers also that go along with it. One thing with like cold plunging or any stress-inducing activity, right? If you're using HRV or cortisol levels or any of these things, you're like, all right, well, my body is, intermittent fasting falls into this too. So if my body's already getting its ass kicked from a stress standpoint, there are certain behaviors, and feel free to disagree with me on this based on what you know. There are certain things that maybe you on a certain day you modify or avoid or whatever, so as to not increase cortisol, to increase the stress level. Is that kind of what you guys do bring into account?
Exactly. So if your body is already under a lot of stress, right, and your cortisol levels are already quite high, so going into an extreme temperature sauna, for instance, if your immune system's been shot and you're not feeling great, going into an extreme temperature, a 200-degree sauna is not going to do you any good, right? And it's also the same essentially with an ice bath. And so it's all about understanding how you're feeling, right? But having that data and then implementing the interventions trying to see and gauge how they're working in real time, and then doing those retests to obviously see what's actually effective and what's not.
Yeah, I love that. Are you guys doing much with HRV? That was kind of a new
At the moment,
thing
we're
I haven't.
not.
Okay, that was kind
At
of
the
a new
moment,
thing
we're
that
not.
I hadn't really learned. I'd really never heard much about it. I know the data is still kind of ongoing, which is heart rate variability and its relation to stress and all. Mine's low. My wife loves those numbers because she's like, I'm so much healthier than you because mine's high. But
Yeah.
they're all kind of baseline numbers. Now, when you guys look at all these markers and these pillars and the data that you have, are you seeing a distinction between age groups? Like a lot of the guys that listen to this are 40 plus, but I also have a lot of guys that I'm working with that are in the 18 to 30, right? And I'm trying to kind of help these younger guys, right? Like that's one thing I really have a heart for, is reaching into the younger guys on their health and goal setting and marriage and family and those kind of things. But I'm interested in what you're seeing across the board.
That's a great question. So we've tested currently about 150 individuals so far. We've been on the market only a few weeks now. So we've tested about 150 individuals, and we have such a broad range of demographics. But if you look at the statistics and what we're meant to be seeing, it'll be interesting when we go and do the retesting, which is actually starting at the end of this month. So hard data in terms of retesting and what those actual percentages are for improvements on each marker, I will actually have at the end of the month. And I'd love to be able to come in blazing with exactly what we have right now. But if you look at the stats, 35% of men over 45 have significantly lower libido than 10 years ago as well. Yeah. And if you're looking at any individual, the men over 25, I believe, are experiencing higher levels of chronic stress than previously, than 10 years ago as well. So the difference in age group is going to be pretty apparent for us as soon as we start retesting, for sure.
Yeah, and I think the scary thing is that the differences probably would not be as extreme as what we would hope they would be, right? Like you want someone that's 22 to be more healthy, and that's a quote unquote right there, but than someone that's 65. I mean, like just from a baseline data, if they're not doing anything to make any changes. But in reality, that's probably not actually true overall.
Yeah, I would think you would think that they would be a lot more separated, but I would say that the data is going to show that they're actually closer to each other than most people would say.
Now, so let's talk about young Luke. How old are you?
35.
Okay, so you're still young. I'm 51. But if you were like looking back to being in your early 20s, right? Like versus first of all, I wish I had known at 22 what I know now about health and recovery and fitness. And, I have a degree in exercise physiology, so I wasn't taught any of this kind of stuff, right? Like it's just lift weights, eat right, move on with your life kind of a thing. And I would love to have had it at 35 also, right? Like how do you look back and see yourself in your 20s? What were you doing kind of things? And then what do you see for yourself now, health and fitness wise? And then what do you see? Like, I got a buddy, man's like, I want to live to be 120 and healthy. And I think, and he's in his, mid 40s, which is theoretically possible. Right.
Yeah.
And so kind of go through that age range. Cause that's, I'm trying to really get all men to really think about this no matter how old they are.
Yeah. So, it was, even though I'm 35, it was a different age back then. Right. I played rugby all the way through my late teens. So I had been training, I had been healthy and quite fit for majority of my life. And then early 20s, I used to work on the oil rigs off the west coast of Australia. So my lifestyle was quite rigid in that sense that I would wake up, I would work, and then I would train, and then I would go to sleep. So in terms of looking at what I was trying to accomplish, it's actually different from a goal standpoint to what I've been trying to accomplish, let's say over the last 5 to 10 years. Back then it was simply just trying to get as muscular as I possibly can and eating as many calories as I possibly could, clean calories, and lift as heavy as I possibly could. And then over time, as I've aged, as you said, I'm still only 35, but as I've aged, you notice different patterns in recovery. You notice injuries start coming to fruition from football, many, many years ago. And so it's more about the management of the recovery process and the management of essentially how much strain and how much pressure I'm kind of putting on my body at once. Right now, the way that I train is, I train 5-6 days a week. I don't ever lift to the 1 or 3 rep max like I used to. There is no need to do those max lifts if you're looking for hypertrophy. And it's more about kind of maximizing the time under tension and the muscle contraction over pushing as heavy weight as possible, right? And then a lot of focus lately has actually been on improving myself as a more of a hybrid athlete. So you have this new kind of trend in training where it's gone from either bodybuilding or CrossFit or endurance, where they're doing 100 milers, to this more of this hybrid athlete kind of movement. And it's more about being a well-rounded individual, to where you can go and crush a CrossFit workout, you can sit in the gym, and you can also push out a solid hypertrophy workout. But then you also have the endurance of some of these marathon athletes as well. And looking at where I wanted to go with my training, instead of being super, I would say, focused on more of the bodybuilding aspect and not swinging, all the way over to going to a complete endurance athlete, being able to run a few miles at a decent pace while also being able to push heavy weight is really kind of the goal for this hybrid kind of movement and myself at the moment. So training, nutrition, recovery has all changed significantly between even when I was, I would say, late 20s to even 30 to where I'm currently at now. And the results that I'm seeing personally are phenomenal. And it's been really a focus on really dialing in my recovery times and not overtraining, and making sure that obviously my nutrition is on point.
And what is that? I mean, the mindset shift. What was it that kind of, first of all, I love that holistic view of fitness. Like, I really want to, that's what I try to do at my age now. We've done multiple marathons, a bunch of half marathons. I'm top heavy. I got smaller legs, and I finally started to build a little bit more mass in my legs at my age. By the way, it's doable. Yeah. But like, I was fatter. The fattest I've ever been is when we were training for a marathon, because our nutrition sucked, and you give yourself permission. 18-mile run, I burned X number of calories. I'll have these, whatever, eat poorly. But I love to be, we did, I'm not a CrossFit guy, but a couple of weeks ago, we did 2 20-minute EMOMs back to back. I was in a group of about 40 men, and I was the second oldest, and I did okay. Like, I felt pretty good about it, how I did, but it was a level of endurance that reminded me that my level of endurance is not where it needs to be, right? Like, I want to be able to go in and do a 20-minute EMOM, which is every minute on the minute. If you're not familiar with that term, look it up. There's some crazy stuff that you can do. But to your point, being able to have that holistic approach to being fit. Yeah. And I think that's amazing. How did that mindset shift for you? Like, what did you decide, to do that?
Great question. So I was working when I was building the studio portfolio that we had. I started that journey at 27 years old, and I was 27, training nearly 7 days a week, most days, working from 4 a.m. till 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And I was eating really well. And to one of your points earlier, I felt something was off, right? I felt something was off. I was fit, but I wasn't feeling great. So I went and got bloods done. and turns out my testosterone was that of a 2-year-old child, essentially. And so to hone that back in and come full circle is you can feel like, or you can do all the right things and all the right protocols, but until you get the bloods done, you don't actually know how healthy you are biologically. And now that I know, when you look at a lot of endurance athletes, their testosterone is extremely low because their cortisol levels are so high. So I looked at not only my blood work, the data, and what I was actually doing, and I was like, okay, I need to make a shift into focusing on obviously different modalities. Obviously, reducing cortisol was a huge one for me, and implementing more daily habits into my routine, because I was and still am a very structured individual, so that I can actually be healthier than I am now. And once I started going down the path of, I did a lot of breath work, started doing a lot of yoga, started reducing the amount that I was lifting, and kind of increasing my kind of zone 2 training, I just kind of fell in love with being able to move better and having more energy. And then you go for different goals with your physique specifically. And I always suggest and always will keep some form of hypertrophy training in, because of how the muscle development is just so different. Where if you look at a CrossFit athlete compared to not a Olympia bodybuilder, but a bodybuilder, the physique is different. Right? And so you still want the aesthetics, but you also want the functionality. And that's where I kind of shifted over to more of this hybrid training model.
Yeah, the hypertrophy model is like, I'm an evangelist for weight training. And you know, I live in a world of a lot of high performance females, because my wife is but on the automotive side, hot rods and welders and all that kind of stuff. But you know, my wife is my age, so she's 50, about to be 51. And so we're in this age group, and it's really funny to see these women that are in their like 55 plus that are the skinny fat, right? Like they want to, you know, they are just far enough out of where we were kind of that generation that just started, where women could do weight training. They were doing more, you know, more aerobic type stuff, but it also incorporated weight training. But, you know, I joke and say I've been sore for 35 years because I just lift. I just lift every week, right? Like it's just, but it's that little bit of soreness, that little bit of tightness is like almost like an addictive kind of feeling. But I love that hybrid model.
Yeah. And look, I agree. You know, part of the decision is I've gone back and forth between this. So I didn't just shift and all of a sudden, you know, not focus on more of the bodybuilding and go completely hybrid. And I've gone back and forth over the years, and some cycles and programs I'll focus more on, you know, the hypertrophy model, and then other cycles of programs I'll focus more on the holistic kind of functionality and the hybrid training. But part of that shift was really looking at what I wanted out of my life holistically. So the way that I wanted to spend my time. And I noticed that because I love what I do, and I have, even when I was building the gym portfolio, I loved what I did. So I literally found myself working 16 hours a day, and doing it not just because I loved it, obviously because you have to, but I found myself in a position where I didn't have any outside of work hobbies, right? Besides, I was trained and I would work. And when I lift, generally I lift solo. So I lift by myself, headphones in, music blaring, and it's more of a therapeutic kind of meditation for me as well. But over the years of doing that, I realized that, you know, one of my highest values is community. And when you don't really have any other hobbies other than training and working, you lose that part of your life. And when I sold all the gyms, that part of my lifestyle went with it, because we had built multiple communities in a number of different cities in Southern California, and we had, you know, it was a really good experience to be able to bring that many people together and build a kind of a network where everyone could grow, connect, and collaborate. And I sold that kind of network, and we kept the relationships, but the community aspect was gone. And I looked at, you know, the hybrid model and the difference in interactions with these hybrid athletes compared to more of the bodybuilding scene, and started really kind of hanging out with those guys and kind of pushing my performance with the guys that are obviously, you know, athletically much higher performing than I was at the time as well. And I just fell in love with that process again, and being able to go and hang out with a group of individuals and train with a group of individuals and hike and ruck and things like that, and build that camaraderie. It was definitely a shift in mindset. It was like, this is really where I get more fulfillment out of not just being healthier and fitter and building a great physique, but it's also about, you know, being fulfilled and having a more of a community aspect to what I was doing.
Yeah, the community thing, I was surprised, because we, like, the imams that we did, I was at a men's event, and like, I think there's 35 guys there, anywhere from 19 years old to 55 was the oldest. I was the second oldest. But in this particular thing, a guy made the statement that it doesn't matter what level of fitness you are, you still push as hard as you personally can. But the encouragement between the team, you know, we're in teams of 3, you've got that camaraderie, you've got that community, you're sweaty as hell, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
We were doing pull-ups, and I could not physically will myself to do another pull-up, you know, and so it's like, which is a great place but you don't quit. You do the fake ones, you know, you know, I mean, like, basically I was just like barely able to pull my chin up over the bar. But to your point, it's that community aspect of it's a hobby, but it's combining that camaraderie and community that men so often forget and so often miss out on. Did you kind of go through a little bit of an identity crisis when you sold the gyms? Because you talked about kind of setting that aside. And if anybody doesn't know this, if you're a fitness person, your life is from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m., 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and 5 a.m. to 9, which means your life is from 4 a.m. to 9:30 or 10 p.m. Right. So like, that's that lifestyle. But I'm curious if you kind of had any, you know, if that's something that you went through as you and then had to redefine who you were.
That is exactly what happened. So a lot of my identity and my success as an entrepreneur was tied to the success of my portfolio, right? And so even though we got acquired in 22 by a private equity firm, and we did quite well for a portfolio of fitness facilities. And once I sold them, I went through, and I was already working on a different model for Manly, different to what it is now. It's advanced significantly since then. And I didn't realize that my success and my identity was tied to those studios. And once I kind of went through this process, I realized that, you know, I slumped into, you know, some form of a lighter form of depression, and not really understanding, okay, who I was, not to the point where I didn't know what I wanted to do, because I knew I wanted to work on this project where we could bring, you know, personalized health to the men's market, but not having that success identity, and all of a sudden having a startup where everything is going wrong all day, every day, and I'm burning through investment funds, I'm burning through capital, and things aren't working, and it's a matter of trial and testing, and kind of starting again in a space and vertical that I didn't have the business experience in, essentially, right? I had experience and knowledge in the vertical, but I hadn't operated in a D2C model before. I hadn't used AI before either. And so it was really about, okay, how do I need to position myself as a leader that can attract the right individuals to help me build out this concept? And so I started really shifting into focusing on leadership and becoming a CEO that individuals want to work with and individuals want to invest in as well. And that's been a long process. As you know, it's a lifelong journey of improvement. But when you have a specific systematic approach to growth, and you have a very, very deep understanding of who you are, what your strengths are, what value you bring to the table, and you're able to pitch a vision and then somehow convince people to come along for that journey, and then leave their kind of certainty and come along for the ride with you, and then also pitch people to be able to give you investment for that vision. You find a very unique kind of skill set and confidence in yourself, so to speak. And that, as I said, has just been it's been a wild ride of personal growth for sure over the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can hear it in your voice, that excitement of that, right? Yeah. And the irony with all this, I've had conversations with quite a few guys that have been like on that exit path or have had that exit path, and I call it the like once I kind of this philosophy of once I do this or once I get there or once. And the irony is that like here you're sitting probably going through all this situation, and you're like, you look at your bank balance, you're like, wow, that's an awesome number. But at the same time, like, what the hell do I do now? Like like you said, you already had some things in the pipeline, but once you tie yourself up into a certain activity or identity, and it becomes a challenge to do that. I think whether you're an entrepreneur, which a lot of the guys that listen to this are entrepreneurs, and we're a little bit crazy, and to your point, you're basically trying to get other entrepreneurial people to come alongside you along the crazy journey.
Yeah.
But whether you're that, or you're just trying to be a better father, a better husband, a better man, that identity is something that is supposed to grow over time. So like your journey from doing the portfolio, selling it, kind of identity crisis, and then now at a point when you're in your mid-30s to say, look, this is part of my journey, right? Like your journey at 35 is different than your journey at 22. My journey at 51 is going to be different than my journey at 60. And I'm not, for us, we don't retire, right? Like we just find something.
Exactly.
We just find something new to do. And all that to say, like, if you're listening to this and you feel stuck and you feel in that place where you're just, like, contentment is something that is a killer, right? Like and I say contentment in like, I'm just going to do this. This is just my life now. Right.
Yeah.
And I love your story because it really shows that someone that is a very high performing person still faces those challenges. Right. And it's still something that you have to go through all the time.
Yeah, I always say to individuals, I said it to my old business partners a few months ago, is every single day, the amount of adversity you face as a startup founder is immense, and it's extremely overwhelming. And that's a lot of the reason why 97% of startups fail, is because there is just too many obstacles and too much adversity. And they just get hung up and they're unable to really push through that. And what I used to use, and I still use it, as I said, I said it to my old business partner, is I used to work underground as a diamond driller. And when I have hard days, I look at going down the hole and going, 3 miles underground and spending 13 hours in darkness, slinging steel, covered in shit, for 4 weeks at a time. And then I would have 1 week off, and then I would repeat. And I just say, nothing's as hard as going down the hole. Right. And for the last 8 years since I moved to the US, I've been able to build multiple companies and reinvent myself time and time again to be able to lead the vision that I had at the time and that I have at the time. And so when you're looking at personal growth, there would be no value in the journey if it was easier. Because as we all know, it sounds cliche, and everyone that's listening knows this, but everything you want is on the other side of the hard thing, right? The issue is with the perspective that you have when you're going through it is, why is this so hard? And you'll find yourself saying that over and over again. And I catch myself because I know that if it wasn't this hard, there would be no growth on the other side of it. And you would not be able to evolve into the individual that you need to be in order to accomplish the vision or the dream or the goals, the milestones that you have and who you want to be. Whether that's as an entrepreneur, whether, as you said, whether that's a father or as a husband, as a partner, it's the adversity that is going to mold and shape your character and your perspective on the world, which is then, especially as a father, which I'm not, so I can't speak firsthand, but that's going to then flow into how well you parent and how your child sees the world, right? As well, and the lessons that you can give that little human, which is really special. So I look at the biggest muscle that is needed as a startup founder or as a young man, if I'm talking to young man, is grit. And it's about how much you can endure for how long you can endure it. And at the end of the day, as long as, and again, this is going to be a cliche little quote, but
we're good.
they're just popping in my head. But as long as you don't quit, you haven't failed. And so you can figure out what doesn't work and then pivot and move forward. But the continuation of the journey and the continuation of putting in the work and putting in reps and reps and reps over an extended period of time is going to give you the results that you're looking for. But as entrepreneurs, we're hardwired to move the goalposts every single time. That's part of entrepreneurship, right? That's what it is. And so you're never, ever going to be satisfied. And so if you look at the goalpost as always the end result, you actually end up living a decade or 2 decades of pretty much unhappiness and unfulfillment. Because I did that. And until I started shifting my perspective into the obstacle, this is another quote, the obstacle is the way, right? And so when you start looking at these obstacles as an opportunity to sharpen your sword and figure out solutions and become more intelligent and understand more about what you're capable of, then the entire journey becomes a huge line of lessons and growth. And that's the way I like to look at it now, is like something happens and it's like, sweet, let's go straight into solution mode. And how do we fix this? And in turn, that makes everyone involved better. It was a long-winded explanation, but yeah.
No, I mean, I absolutely love that. I've talked about before that as an entrepreneur and just who I am as a man, I expect failure, right?
Yeah.
Like failure is not a surprise to me because I know myself, but I'm missing that. I always say, people are like, why do you know how to do so many things? And I'm like, because I'm missing that thing in my head that tells me I shouldn't try.
Yeah.
And so by trying different things, you learn, and I've redone so many different things, right? Like, so having that, you're not being so averse to failure, I think is a huge component. And to your point, and let me throw in my own cliche, right? It's the pleasure is in the journey.
Yeah.
Right. Like life is supposed to be fun. I was listening to something one day and I have my goals for 2024 on this whiteboard I'm looking up to my right now. And I had all my numbers, I have multiple brands, and I have all these, metrics and all that kind of stuff. And it was stressing me out because I was thinking about it all the time. And so I was listening to a guy that's funny because I just got a text from him on one of his things, David Meltzer. And I changed this board, who David is. I changed this board. Now my goals say have fun, serve others, and build a life. Like those are my goals, right? And under that is gratitude and joy and fun and happiness and all that under the build a life thing, because it is supposed to be fun. If it's not fun, and like you say, being in a startup, getting VC money, getting private equity, all of that crap is stressful. Like but at the end of the day, you're still enjoying what you're doing. I always give the example. I've got this 65 Cobra Roadster that I built, and there's like 3,500 hours into it. It's an amazing car, super fast, does whatever I want it to do. I don't drive it. Like I don't drive it. And I always think it was way more fun to build it than it actually is to drive it, for whatever reason. And people, I'm a car guy through and through, so come yell at me if you're a car guy. Anyway, they need to be driven. But that's to say that the journey of getting there and accomplishing, looking at this piece of automotive art is what got me there. My businesses are the same. Your businesses are the same. My kids are the
Yeah.
same. My marriage is the same. You know, it's like this
It's
journey that we go through, right?
exactly. It's all in the process, mate. You know, and back to your point is living more for a living, right? And figuring out what lights you up and then doing more of that.
Mhm.
A lot of guys, and it's the same in the startup world. Like, you know, for the most part, you're wearing every hat that there is to wear in the company until you have the resources, or you can convince people to come on the ride with you. And when you figure out how you can optimize a team that is high performing and that owns the vertical that they're in, and I'm just speaking in business here, that gives you then the freedom to then focus on the things that light you up within the business. And when you do that, you're inherently going to move through milestones much faster because you love the work that you're doing.
Mhm.
If you're in all of the boring work, and look, as you know, you know very well, the boring work is where everything actually gets done. Like
Yeah.
we all know that. It is the years of boring work sitting inside an office where everything is actually getting done. And when you get to a point there where you can only focus on what the things that light you up and what you're really good at, that's it. That's a great place to be,
Mhm.
right? And it's hard to get there at start, but when you do get to that place, that's when you can look at, okay, how am I living more for a living? What lights me up on the daily? And even if you're not directly at that spot, that's where you should be aiming to get to every day. I have the same. So I have a process that I have used and I've rinsed and repeated. I've taught this to dozens and dozens and dozens of entrepreneurs as well. And it's a blend between OKRs. You're familiar with OKRs,
Mhm.
objectives and key results, and a reflect and project method that I have. And I basically go through a journal entry every day, just dump and brain dump to try and clear my mind and trigger some dopamine so that I can hardwire my brain for accomplishment. And then I ask myself a few questions. Those questions are designed to dump dopamine into my brain. And what happens when we get dopamine, the brain immediately wants more. So when we're hardwiring our brain for accomplishment, we're looking at asking those questions and then going through my objectives and my key results and then my daily clear goals. And every time you tick off one of those daily clear goals, you get a hit of dopamine. It's only a small hit, but you get a hit of dopamine. So what happens is over time, as you go through this process, you're hardwiring the brain for accomplishment. So you're always looking to keep progressing and just continuously making progress and hitting milestones toward whatever the objectives are. And so I've used that process for the last, 5-6 years. And it's just allowed me to really understand what I need to do every day. But also it's opened up time for me to also work on the things that light me up, which is the best part of the process.
I love that. Can you give me an example of a couple of those dopamine dumping questions that you ask?
Yeah, so the first thing I ask is, what were my wins yesterday? And these are like hard wins. So it's like, did I get a contract done? Did I get a deal done? Did I make a sale? Did I onboard a new team member? Did I get to this advisor? Something that's significant, not just, I got my work done for the day. And then the second question is did I live within my living for a living, as we're talking about it, metrics? And I have like 4 metrics that each day would make the day great. One of them is get a deal done. So whether that's a new partner, a new affiliate, a new sale, an investor, or a new team member on board, something that is going to move the company forward, right? The second one is training with friends. So did I open my day up? Did I train with some of the boys today? The third one is skills development. Did I grow? So every day I make sure that I spend an hour to 2 hours, it's generally about an hour and a half, developing my skill sets as a leader, my financial literacy, in men's health specifically, whatever it is. It could be a podcast, could be a book, could be something that I'm studying on a subject. I just make sure that I get that in. And then the last one is, what did I just cover? Sorry, I just had a mind blank. What did I just cover?
You got skill set. Yeah, you got skill set. You got training.
Sorry, the last one is connection.
Win. Yeah, connection.
And so, you know, did I connect with at least one new person today?
Mm.
And so I take, you know, I make sure that every day I have something on my calendar, whether it's a Zoom meeting, whether it's a coffee, it could be something on Instagram or social media, where I'm making sure that I'm building and nurturing my network and I'm connecting with one new person. So that's the third question. The fourth is, did I live with integrity today? And so living with integrity means, the way that I look at it is, did I do everything I said I was going to do today? So I have a list of clear goals. And then if I've ticked all that list off, it's very easy for me to have that metric and say, I did, right? Yeah. And then the last one is, what would make today great, essentially. How would I make today the best day I possibly could? And that's objective as well. It depends on where you are in your journey, what you're doing. It's not like, oh, I wish I was on an island in Greece. Like, you've got to be realistic. Yeah. It's like, I have a startup. How can I make this the best day possible? And then I make sure that I work on doing that for the day.
I love that. I love every single one of those. I've talked a lot about celebrating wins. At the end of your day, giving yourself things that you can accomplish at the beginning of the day to kind of set like you're saying, set yourself up for success. I'm pretty excited that I get to be one of the connections for today as this podcast. So you check that off. Check that off. Dude, this has been amazing. I'd love to have an opportunity to, you know, as you guys get farther along, to come back and kind of study more about what's going on with the data and all that. If people want to get involved with MNLY and what's going on, if they want to learn more about you, get some more of your coaching, how do they do that?
The best way to understand more of the MNLY model, the product, and everything that we're doing is just jump on the website. It's getmnly.com. There's a ton of information on there. You can also go to our Instagram, which is at getMNLY, getMNLY. You can also connect with our team on there as well. We're very active on there if you want to ask questions. For myself, it's the same. My LinkedIn, and which is Luke Hartelust, and then also my Instagram, which is Luke_Hartelust, and be happy to answer any questions anyone has. And if you just want to connect, reach out.
Awesome, Luke. This has been a big highlight of my day, so I appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, let's do it again.
Absolutely, Kevin.